Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com. I'm here with our NBA DraftKings picks for Monday, Martin Luther King Day. Remember, the first couple games do start kind of early today, so I wanted to make sure I got a video out for you guys. Just walked in from basketball practice, as you can see, so I'm all ready. And, just want to hit on some of the highlights of some of the games that I think we should be targeting and some of the guys who I think are in good spots that you want to make sure you put into some of your rosters. Remember, East Coast guys, the first game starts, I think, at 1 o'clock today. There aren't a lot of big slates for the 1 o'clock game, but there are some big slates and some big tournaments that start for the 2 o'clock games. So we're going to kind of concentrate on the 2 o'clock games and everything after that. A couple games that we think you should be targeting. The Blazers and the Wizards today. Pretty close spread, 214 total overall. I think John Wall's in a really good spot at 9,500 against Damian Lillard defense. Also think Marcin Gortat at 7,000 is in a good spot against the Portland big men. On the other side for Portland, you do have Lillard. He hasn't done all that great against Wall in some of their past matchups, but again, this is a guy who's been putting up 45 to 50 fantasy points on the day. The problem that I have is you're basically paying the same amount of money. I think Wall's 95, Lillard's 96. I like Wall a lot better in this matchup. His team is favored. They should probably win this game, and he is a high usage guy. So if I'm using anybody between those two, I think John Wall over Damian Lillard is the way that I would go. Another game that has some nice targets that we should look at, Chicago going up against Detroit. It's about a 203 total in that game. Reggie Jackson, I think, is in a good spot against a weak Bulls point guard defense. And there's no Brandon Jennings in this game. So he's not going to be losing a couple minutes to Jennings as he has been over the last few games that they've played. So I do think this is another good spot for Reggie Jackson. Only 7,000. His prices come down. I agree with you guys. He hasn't been playing all that great lately, but I do think this is a good chance for him to bounce back. The guy who I actually like even more in this game, though, is Andre Drummond, and it's somebody I'm going to be paying up for on cash and GPP rosters. Now, Drummond is about 8,900 over on DraftKings today. But if you look back in the game log from earlier in the year, they've already played Chicago twice. The first time they played Chicago, he had a pretty good game, put up 55 fantasy points, which would be a really nice return for us at a little below 9K. The second time they played him, though, he had a monster game. One of those 2020 kind of games that he puts up, finished with 74 fantasy points. So he has been dominating against this Bulls team. Joakim Noah is out, and he is their best defensive center. I love Pau Gasol as much as the next guy, but no one's ever going to, vote for him for a Defensive Player of the Year award. So I think Drummond is in a really, really good spot here. Detroit's been playing well lately. Chicago's been struggling a little bit. It wouldn't shock me to see, a 25-point, 14, 15 rebound effort come out of Andre Drummond today. I think he's one of the guys that I would be willing to pay up for in a lot of rosters. Next game I want to talk about, that Orlando and Atlanta game, I think might be a sneaky good spot to find some fantasy goodness. On the Orlando side, there's a good chance that Victor Oladipo is going to be out for this game. So if Depot's out, you're going to get Elfrid Payton coming back from injury. He's 5,300. I'm a little bit on the fence for him. I do think he does see the minutes, but I'm not sure if he's 100% healthy yet. The guy who I think makes for the best swerve in this game is actually Evan Fournier. Fournier is 5,100 in this game, so he is pretty cheap. And again, with no Oladipo, he's going to see big minutes at the 2 spot. And the 2 spot is really how you want to attack Atlanta. You're going to have him going up against Kyle Korver defense, which is probably the weakest part of that, Atlanta defensive side. So I think that this is a great spot for Fournier. I would expect him to put up a big number. I think he's also extremely safe for cash games at only 5,100. I think he's almost a lock for about 25 fantasy points, and I think he can give you upside 30, maybe even 35 fantasy points here and really give you some, added value in tournaments as well. I also think Nikola Vucevic is an interesting option here. I'm not going to say he's a great option, but he's been playing very well lately. He's been putting up 40 fantasy points, going 6x value. And he's the kind of player that Al Horford struggles with. As much as we love Al Horford and as talented as he is, he's really a 6'10" power forward playing center. So when he goes up against a true 7-footer with, inside post moves and a little bit of size like Vucevic is, those are usually the guys that he winds up struggling against. On the flip side of this game for Atlanta's been playing basically a really deep bench. Everybody's been getting some time on the floor. You do still have Korver pretty cheap, so I think he's an okay option. But my favorite option on this team is actually Paul Millsap. Millsap is just an absolute beast. He had a bad game last out because he only played 27 minutes in a blowout. He also had a bad game 3 or 4 back for the same reason, that they were getting blown out and he only played 27 minutes. When he sees the 32 to 35 minutes he's used to seeing, he's putting up 40 fantasy points for us, even up into 50. So at 8K, I think he's another solid option that we can consider. The Golden State Warrior Cleveland game is an interesting one. I do think it's going to be close. I do think we see full run from the starters. I don't think Draymond Green's 100%. Kyrie Irving's not a very good defender, so I think Steph Curry's definitely in play here. On the other side of that game, I do think LeBron James has a pretty good game as well. He should see some Harrison Barnes defense, maybe some Andre Iguodala defense. I think that he's in a good spot to put up some good numbers. I don't think they're going to put Draymond on him. Draymond's not 100% right now, which even lets me think that, Kevin Love might be in a pretty good spot here at 7K as well. So there's a lot of guys that I think you can look at in this game. The only problem I have is they're all very expensive. So you're going to have to find some value that opens up, later on in the day when we do get a chance to see who's in and see who's out, which is going to be tough today. It's a good thing if you're playing on DraftKings because you can put in that lineup at 2 o'clock and then, see how some of the injury news breaks on later. Make sure you leave your, guard forward utility spot open for guys that play later in the day. And you might find some, value that opens up that gives you some swerves that lets you fit in another stud or two. The Boston-Dallas game is another interesting one to me. This is one that I wouldn't really target so much for GPP upside, but I do like it a lot for cash games. On the Dallas side, you have Dirk and Zaza. We know that Boston struggles guarding big guys. Dirk and Zaza are both about 6K. They've both been putting up 30 to 36 fantasy points on DraftKings lately. So I think both of those guys are in a really good spot and, would be guys that I'd use in cash. Neither one of them usually gives you the tournament upside that you want. You're not going to get 40 or 50 points usually out of Dirk and Zaza. But if you can get 35 points out of them for around 6K, that's going to help you double up in your double ups. It's going to help you hit in your 50-50s. And it's going to give you, keep you on pace to do what you want to do, 275, 280 kind of score in all your cash games. On the other side of that game, Jay Crowder has been another guy at the small forward spot who's, been a great cash game play. And Avery Bradley at only 5,200 is another guy. Bradley and Crowder probably have the safest 30 to 35 minutes of anybody on the Boston Celtics team. Isaiah Thomas, Marcus Smart, those guys, their minutes kind of fluctuate a little bit closer to 30 than 35. The big guys, you got Amir Johnson, you got Sullinger, you got Olynyk. All those guys are kind of split in minutes as well. They're all playing about 30. So the two guys who play the most minutes are Bradley and Crowder. I think both of those guys are reasonably priced, and they're both solid cash game plays. Again, I don't know if I'd use them in tournaments. Maybe Bradley in a tournament because 5,200 seems a little cheap for him. But he hasn't really been giving you 40-point upside. He's giving you 25 to 30, which is what you're looking for out of a tournament play, but might be a little bit below what you really want out of a guy in a GPP. Moving on to that Houston Clippers game, that's the last one I want to talk about. I haven't really been using James Harden much lately. He's pretty much been underperforming. Hasn't had 6X value since all the way back on December 9th. So it's been over a month right now since we've really seen the upside we want out of him. I do like Chris Paul a lot, especially if DeAndre Jordan's out. He's been picking up his game a little bit. Yes, he is expensive, but again, he's been returning really nice value for you. Points, assists. He's picking up a lot of steals lately. So he's somebody I think you can look at. A couple of my hopeful plays that I can put in there depending on how the injury news works out. If DeAndre Jordan's out, I think we can look at a cheap $4,200 Cole Aldridge. Again, Aldridge has been giving you really good value when he's been playing the minutes. I think he does see the minutes here. I think there's a good chance DeAndre Jordan's going to be out in this game. So I think that, Cole Aldridge is going to be somebody who has to be on the floor. Now, Dwight Howard was supposed to sit yesterday, but he wound up playing. I don't know if he's going to play today. They may decide to sit him. They've been doing that, playing him one game of the back-to-back. So if he sits, I think you got to upgrade guys like Capella, maybe even Terrence Jones, because you do have Donatas Montejunas out as well. So if you don't have Montejunas and you don't have Howard, there's a lot of minutes that open up for the big guys in this game. They don't have a spread on it because they're still waiting to see if DeAndre Jordan plays or if Howard sits or how any of that's going to work out. But I do think that the total on this game is going to be high, probably in the 208 to 215 range whenever it does come out, depending on who's in and who's out of this game. So I think you can look at that Houston-LA Clippers game for some plays as well. There are some other games that you guys will know that I didn't mention. Some of those games are really big spreads. Some of those games are just really low totals. But the ones that I mentioned are the ones that I'm going to be looking to target and try to take some players from. As always, on a day like this, when lineups lock at 2 o'clock, if you don't have guys that are playing in those first couple games, make sure you leave that utility guard forward spot open, because I can just about guarantee you sometime around like 4, 5, 6 o'clock before all the late games start, you're going to get some injury news that pops up that we're not even contemplating or we don't even know about right now. And it might open up some value for you. So, if there are guys in these early games that you really like, feel free to roll them out there, but make sure you use them in the point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center spot up top. Try to save those spots at the bottom. This way you give yourself at least a little bit of roster flexibility. So if stuff does come down later on in the day, on DraftKings, you can make those swerves over there. On FanDuel, I'm going to be honest, I'm not playing any all-day lock games. I might wait. I think there's a whole bunch of games at like 6 or 7 o'clock where there's like a 5 or 6 game slate that, we'll lock up later. I'll play those games over on FanDuel today. But on DraftKings, perfectly fine to throw some lineups in for the 2 o'clock game. Like I said, just make sure you leave yourself some flexibility so that when news comes down later on in the day, you have a place to swerve off to. So like I said, I just wanted to make sure I got this video out for you guys. Games are starting in a couple hours over here. So I wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to hear my thoughts and, kind of narrow down some of your choices. I know a lot of people are off today, so they're probably home, want some information, want some videos. You can drop it on here. I will be around on Twitter for the most part up until lineups lock. I do have my kids off from school today too, so I'm running around pulling double duty as Mr. Mom, and also trying to get you guys out this fantasy info. So feel free to tweet at me if you have any questions that you want answered. I'll try to get them to you. If you tweet at RotoCurve, Jimmy or Josh may also be around, and they may be able to answer them for you as well. So thanks for joining us here for the DraftKings NBA video on this Martin Luther King Day with these early games that we got. Hope everybody's enjoying their holidays, and as always, stay classy, DFS.